because it was one of the worst, if not, no, probably not the worst, one of the worst times of my life. I put it down to was the B12 injection, because that was the only thing I had. You know, I'd stopped supplementing and everything, and I was me again. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I have a very different video in comparison to my usual sort of beauty, hair and fashion videos, but equally it's something really important. It's something that's been going on in my life, and hopefully this video can help others. And I have to keep checking this mirror. If you keep seeing me look down like this, it's because I'm checking to see if there's any like red lipstick on my teeth. But just for a quick side note, I'm not a doctor, I'm not any nutritional, you know, professional. It's just somebody that's gone through experience, and I think I'm able to sort of talk about that myself. So firstly, in March, February, I was feeling quite unwell. I felt really tired for a long time, and I have early starts for work anyway. I get up at like 5 every morning because I work in sort of education, and I was noticing that sort of the tail end of 2019 to sort of February, I was very tired, and I was like, I'm getting up every morning, and whilst I can get up, I'm just feeling like super exhausted all the goddamn time. And in February I was very ill at work, I was very dizzy. If you guys have ever seen or have experienced, I think it's called a hypo, where you have low blood pressure, I pretty much was having that, but it wasn't low blood sugar because my blood sugar was absolutely fine. But I was like shaky and I was dizzy, I couldn't see properly, and I had the biggest panic attack that I have ever had in my life, which made things, like everything, so much worse. I want to do a video on my health anxiety, but I don't know if that's something that people will be interested in. I don't know, I might film it, see how it goes. But yeah, anyway, I was feeling very ill, and I managed to get an emergency appointment that day in the doctors, who then tested my bloods for like a full blood count with like some other bloods as well, and my B12, which was something that I've never even heard of before, come back at sort of the underneath the like the minimum threshold then that's held by the NHS. So my B12 was 162, and I think that's in a range of 200 to like 1,000. So the 200 to 1,000 is pretty much like your normal, and I'm going to explain the normal, these things in a minute. But yeah, so mine come back at 162. My doctor, who is amazing, he is fantastic. I have changed doctors since then just because of moving, and we're sort of being in lockdown and stuff. But he told me to go on to 50 micrograms of, I think it's cyanobalamin. It's a B12 supplement anyway. So that was that. I sort of left and was kind of like, right, okay, so this B12, what is it? And I found out that actually this B12 is a water-soluble vitamin, so it means that it's one of those supplements that if you take sort of too much of it, or your body doesn't need as much of it, you just sort of pee it out. That's pretty much the way to put it, hence it being sort of water soluble. So so your B12 is really like, it is the main sort of vitamin that is there to help create DNA. It's there to sort of line all of your nerves. I think it's like the myelin sheath, I think it's called. It's there to help make red blood cells, etc, etc. So it's a really important vitamin, and what's even worse is that our body doesn't tend to hold on for it for a long time, and it cannot produce it naturally. So we get B12 from mainly meat products and sort of dairy as well. It's not equally in dairy as much as it is meat. So those who are at risk of sort of low B12 are those that eat sort of a strict vegan or a strict vegetarian diet, amongst other things as well. Now, I eat chicken, and that's got to be it. Like, I eat a lot of dairy. I say a lot of dairy. I like cheese, basically, a lot. But yeah, in terms of like red meats and other white meats and stuff, I don't eat them, and I never have, like, in my whole life. Maybe as a kid things were completely different because my nan used to feed me quite a lot, and I'd always have some meat on there at some point. So in terms of me controlling my diet, I don't really eat meat at all. So naturally, and I didn't know this, it put me at risk of a sort of fall in B12 level. And I think in February it kind of got to the point where my body was like telling me that, you know, you're not okay, you're kind of running low on that B12 fuel, and it's just a bit of a warning essentially. Now whilst we have been in lockdown, I was still taking my supplements for maybe 2 to 3 months because I was due another blood test to see if they had risen. And I found that the tablets actually weren't really doing anything. It was making me feel a lot worse, and I just didn't feel great. I mean, I got up one day and I couldn't even, like, the thought of trying to get out of bed, it was just like asking me to walk a mountain. And it was so difficult because, you know, at first when we were sort of in lockdown, I'm so sorry I keep playing with my hair. Oh, sorry. It's like an anxious tendency. But yeah, anyway, so like usually once we went into lockdown, I was like, oh my God, we can get up, I can cook breakfast and do all these like lovely, you know, things around the house and clean. And I was just so excited to be so productive and just to get ahead with stuff whilst my life had sort of, well, everyone's life really had come to some sort of halt. It wasn't the case, and I actually ended up feeling quite unwell for what was going to be quite a long period of time. Well, you know, for somebody who's quite naturally, you know, quite an outgoing sort of productive person. So this whole tiredness, it was literally like fatigue. So if I did get out of bed, I would get out of bed, and then I'd sort of just walk to the bathroom that's like just around the corner. And, you know, even just trying to like lift like a hairbrush just like this, I could not do it. And I had felt as if somebody had beaten me up. I felt like, you know, I'd been in a boxing match with Tyson Fury. And I just felt so weak, and I just thought, my God, like I've never ever felt like this before. It was so strange. So the tiredness and sort of the lack of enthusiasm and the muscle weakness and general, you know, change in personality was just not normal. And at this time, me and Ben had bought some decking to sort of do the decking out in the garden. And even then I just sat down and I just thought, I can't even bring myself to try and do something. I managed in the end, because my thought was, right, I can't go in and go back in the house because otherwise I'm just going to become an absolute mess. So I really tried to push on, but I was absolutely knackered and I just could not work out as to why. And this happened, it's only up until recently it has drastically improved. One of the other concerning symptoms I had was lack of appetite, so I just didn't feel hungry like in the morning. That's still sort of up and down, but most of the time I can sort of go throughout the day with very little food because my appetite's just not there. That I think is more so anxiety, but it does go up and down. But it is a symptom of low B12 levels. And as time sort of progressed and I was on, again, these 50 micrograms, I thought, okay, so I have always been a healthy person. I've been so lucky to never have any issues with my health. Touch wood, okay? So having that low B12 come back was a very abnormal thing for me. And I just sort of attributed everything that I was going through and experiencing to that, because that literally could have been the only thing, the only bit of evidence that I had to sort of, you know, fit my symptoms. So I took to Amazon and bought this B12 spray, and that's a very high dosage spray. I think it's 1,200 micrograms. So where I was on previously 50, I then went to 1,200 micrograms. Now the average that you are meant to get in a day is 2.4 micrograms, I think. Let me just have a look. Oh. So yeah, the average that you're meant to get is about 2.4 for a typical sort of woman, if you are not pregnant and stuff. Now, just to give you a bit of an idea as to how you can get B12, like a steak, 100 grams of steak is about 2.2 micrograms. So that's probably enough to get your daily allowance. Anything after that, usually your body will tend to just sort of flush out of your system. So B12 in really high doses is not harmful at all. So that's not me trying to say take loads, because you just don't need to. But I think they use loads of B12 to treat cyanide poisoning, I think. I think it's cyanide. So yeah, anyway, I was going on, bearing in mind your daily allowance is 2.4, I was on 1,200 micrograms. This was a subliminal spray that I was to spray sort of, you know, in my mouth, and it would absorb very quickly. And as soon as I had that spray, I felt instantly better. You know, like when you water a plant that's just looking really sort of drowsy, and it sort of perks back up a little bit. That's what I felt like for about 2 or 3 days, and I was like, this is great, I feel so much better. And then it got worse. It just got worse. Like, it just manifested itself in so many different ways. Now, for about a week, and I know this doesn't seem long at all because a lot can change and get over itself in about a week, but whilst I'd been very anxious anyway, whilst we've been in lockdown, somebody who has health anxiety, like, and then this massive virus pandemic sort of sweeps itself across the world, could you ask for anything more? So yeah, I think naturally my anxiety levels were quite high anyway, but they sort of, I can tell when I'm anxious, like I know, do you know what I mean? Like I know when I'm anxious, and after taking that spray, I was like, no, I'm actually doing okay, and I'm not as anxious, and I feel quite chilled out. And then sort of a few days later, it just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I was waking up in the morning, and for you know, I talk about this a bit more in my health anxiety video because I think they are very highly correlated with each other, but I was pretty much every morning I would wake up and just be like, oh my god, thank god I've woken up today. And I was so scared of going to sleep every night, excuse me, because I just thought that I wasn't going to be here in the morning, because I thought something was seriously so wrong with me. So imagine you've got, you know, this B12 deficiency anyway that doesn't seem to be improving despite supplementing. I was actually getting worse, and I couldn't, part of the issue was I didn't know why. And for somebody who likes to find out the, you know, the ins and outs and the mechanics of why everything happens, you know, I study psychology and I teach psychology, if you're wondering why I'm so curious. It's just the art of psychology. It's about knowing things, basically, and it's knowing about the mechanics of how we tick and stuff. So yeah, for me this was really difficult, and then obviously that meant Googling symptoms and blah blah blah, but I'm not going to go into that too much because that's a whole different video. However, I started to have, again, a lot of muscle weakness. I started to have a lot of muscle pain and tingling, pins and needles, and the feeling of things going numb. They weren't numb because I could feel them. I like researched how to do like a basic neurology exam, and like the ones that they do at the doctors, and I tested it on myself, other people tested it on me as well, and I could feel everything. It was absolutely fine. But I just wasn't me, I wasn't normal, and I started to have a lot of what felt like neurological symptoms, such as the tingling and weakness and stuff like that. And I also had a lot of brain fog. So this really got to me, this brain fog, because once I recognised that I had it, it was really difficult to try and see that you haven't got it, or it was very easy for me to get very frustrated with myself because I was like, what am I doing? And it would be something as simple as forgetting somebody's name, you know, or putting things in the wrong place, or not remembering to do something, and you're just very sort of slow on the mark with stuff. And that was a massive issue for me, that brain fog, and that lasted for like the whole time. My anxiety got to the point that I've never seen it. Like, I have never seen, and I don't think Ben's seen, me that anxious before. And again, I think I was caught in this loop of anxiety and B12. They were all sort of swirling around together and making this massive thing, like this whole situation, a lot worse. So it was really difficult to try and take, you know, sort of dissect what was actually happening with me. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to talk about, that was my sort of like story with things. Now, at this time, and this is, I'm going to be really clear and really honest about what I'm about to say next, because I don't want this to get twisted, especially in a time where we love the NHS, and I love the NHS, and, you know, to see NHS go or even be threatened in any sort of circumstance would absolutely break my heart, because it is the pride of Britain, you know. So please don't twist what I'm about to say next. However, there is a trend in terms of medical professionals not recognising the severity of B12 deficiencies. And what I mean by that, in my sort of example and along sort of support groups that I have been with, been on a journey with, my new doctor, I was desperate to get retested for B12. Now, at this time, once you start supplementing for something, every other blood test is going to be corrupted? Not corrupted, probably not the word. I can't think of the word. Every other blood test is going to be useless, basically, because it's not measuring accurate levels of B12. So when I had my first B12 level in February, that was the only... Ooh, let's put this ear away because they're too big. When I first had my blood test for B12, that was the most reliable blood test result I will ever have, because I hadn't been supplementing and it was an accurate measure of my B12, arguably. Now, I was retested for my B12, which was something I didn't know about. I was actually being tested for something called intrinsic factor. So when you have B12, and again, I'm not sure on the total ins and outs of this, the B12 needs to bind to something called intrinsic factor in order for it to be digested and to be absorbed. Now, if you don't have that intrinsic factor, you don't produce enough of it for whatever reason. Usually, I think is it Crohn's disease and Crohn's and celiac, I don't know what it's called. I'm going to put it in the description or something. But yes, often those sorts of conditions will stop you from, you know, sort of producing this intrinsic factor. Now, if that is the case and you are physically unable to absorb B12, and only a test will determine this, you are likely to have something called pernicious anemia, which is where essentially you... Well, like I said, you're not able to absorb this B12, and as a result your body is going to sort of suffer from that. Now, the root with pernicious anemia, once you have that, you tend to be on injections for the rest of your life, because it's, again, B12, you can't make it naturally. It's even worse if you're a vegan or vegetarian, because you don't have that source. But even if you do it, you can't absorb it properly, so you need to have intramuscular, I think, muscular injections, which are basically mean it bypasses the whole you know, digestion side of things, and it goes straight into your system. It's 100% fully absorbed. So I did have intrinsic factor. I had a very good level of intrinsic factor, which would suggest that I'm absorbing it correctly. I was tested for the, is it celiac? C-O-E-L-I-C. I can say celiac, and Crohn's didn't have that. So I was just at a point where I thought, right, okay, well, my B12 levels have gone up to 600 from 162, which is absolutely fabulous. And by this time, I noticed a lot of reduction in fatigue and sort of weakness and the symptoms that I was sort of reporting. But I still had this nerve situation going on. The appetite was still very up and down. And I developed dizziness, like really bad dizziness. It wasn't quite vertigo in the sense that everything around me was sort of, you know, sort of spinning around, but I constantly felt like I was rocking on a boat, and I would get up, even lying down, you know, I'd be lying down and I'd be feeling like I was going like this, and it was the most alarming feeling ever. Now, I reported a lot of this to my doctor, and again, you know, they have the most difficult job of trying to figure out what on earth is wrong with you, and they have to, well, my doctor told me when she took me in for a physical exam, she said, you know, we have to think about worst case scenario, and she thought that I could potentially have MS. That was ruled out from sort of the tests that she had been doing, and I was just sort of left, and I just thought, well, you know, I have been denied any injections, B12 injections, because my B12 blood test was absolutely fine. Now, the thing is with B12 is if you supplement, you should not be retested. Absolutely not. If you guys are experiencing a low B12 and you've had that on an actual blood report and you're told to supplement and then get another retest, please know that you are able to say no to this, that you do not want your B12 blood tested again. Reason being, and again, I get why doctors do it, because you can show that it's absorbing. However, it's the most inaccurate measure, because it only counts what's sort of floating around your body, not what's actually being absorbed. And there's no test to say, yes, you can absorb B12. We've got other things such as, you know, the intrinsic factor. I think there's something called MMA, which I'm not entirely too sure what that is. But all those little tests can indicate whether or not you can or cannot absorb it. But there's no one direct test that can do that for you, as far as I'm aware. Now, if you guys have a low blood B12 and you do want to get a bit of an idea of how it's sort of progressing, you can get a test that's called ACTIVE B12, and what that does is that looks at how much active, so how much useful B12 that you have in your body that has the potential to be absorbed, versus the inactive B12, the stuff that you cannot absorb. Anyway, you know, I've sort of educated myself through these things on Facebook groups, Vitamin B12 Wake Up, and there's a sort of deficiency support group as well. There's a lot on there. If you guys are experiencing it and you want to know whether or not you have similar symptoms, or you know, some tests, some guidance, that sort of thing, you know, these are really, really good, useful and helpful groups, and they often can be a really good remedy. So I'm not going to go in the ins and outs and stuff, because there's a lot of guidance on there, and I think it's better if you guys sort of read it for yourself. But there's a lot of things that, you know, I get that doctors have a massive job on their hands. Oh my god, I could not even think about what it's like to be a doctor, even for a day, you know. But B12 deficiency is often it tends to be something that's put on a little bit of a back burner. I don't know why. I really do not know why. But what I think happens is B12 deficiencies, and again, I just thought it's a vitamin, it's fine, I don't really need much of it. Well, we found out that actually I do need it, and it's very essential for my mental and physical well-being as well. So anyway, I was refused injections because I was able to absorb it. Yes, my levels had gone up, but I still had some symptoms that had suddenly reappeared. I had new symptoms, and it was just oh god, you guys, honestly, I was in an absolute mess for days. I was a state. I was horrendously crying. I constantly kept touching my legs, because I was like, this shin part is cold and the rest of my foot, rest of my leg is warm, I've got something wrong with me. A B12 deficiency can mimic symptoms of MS, and you know, this was exactly what I was experiencing, and it was the most upsetting, horrendous time that I would never wish on anybody else. So I went for an injection. Oddly, let me just brush my hair because it's getting a bit ratty. I rang 111 because I had enough. I was dizzy, I had muscle weakness, there was just so many things going on with me, and my doctor was not saying, you know, there was no forward conversation of, right, it's not this, let's look at this. So that frustration come out of there, and I thought, I've got to take things into my own hands. Now, I wasn't going to ring 111 because I just thought, right, I'm going to be wasting their time here. Like, there's people that have genuinely got proper things wrong, and I'm just sort of, you know, riding out these symptoms whilst they are very scary. Now, the lady I spoke to on the phone, she actually runs a B12 clinic. She didn't promote it to me, but I did my own research afterwards. But she was having a chat to me about B12, and she said, you know what, 600 is great. It's absolutely bang on. If that had been your initial B12 reading without supplements. She was very surprised that I was taking a high dose of B12 for about a month and a half, and my results had only gone up to 600. She would have expected them to be at least over the thousands mark. Now, she said to me as well, the fact that you don't eat meat, you're probably making yourself really vulnerable, and you're still not replenishing it, and you're probably not absorbing 100% of the supplements. I think there's a chance that it could only be 1% of the supplements that I was actually absorbing. Anyway, my voice is going, Jesus wept. So anyway, I booked in at this clinic that I'd done some research on myself, and went to have the injection. I paid £40. I can't remember what, I think it was Hydrox you get two different types of B12 basically. One's a more synthetic one, and then one's more naturally sourced. And I don't know the exact one or the actual dosage, but I had it injected into my arm here. It didn't hurt, which was weird. It was just uncomfortable because I felt it all go in. Like, obviously you feel it piercing the skin, and then you feel it go into the muscle, and you're like, what? Okay, this is not very nice. So yeah, that was that. I felt the same the day after. That day I felt a bit like really tired. The day after I felt really tired, and I just thought, oh, do you know what? I just don't know what's wrong with me. I'm 25. Something is wrong with me. And it was almost like I'd given up on everything, because I just thought, there's no way this can be anxiety. There is, you know, I've given up thinking that this is B12 related. Something's wrong with me, and I just almost left myself. You know, in Lion King, when Simba's led down and after his dad's been killed, and he's just there and the vultures are watching him. That would have been me in a cartoon, because I had just had enough. Next day, I was fine. I was back to me. Touch wood, because I don't ever want to be in that place again, and I do not want to jinx myself. My tiredness is gone. My appetite is still up and down, but to be honest, I'm not a big eater anyway. Like, when I have a meal, it's like a massive meal. And I don't eat many meals a day, which is bad actually. I need to stop it. Everything went. Everything went. My dizziness took a little bit longer to go. It was only like yesterday I noticed that it was actually getting much better, and that had been like a week after this injection. And I just couldn't believe it. And I don't know what it was, and the only thing that I could put it down to was the B12 injection, because that was the only thing I had. You know, I'd stopped supplementing and everything, and I was me again. Because it was one of the worst, if not, no, probably not the worst, one of the worst times of my life. Now, I went back to my doctor and I said that I had you know, this B12 injection, and I was right as rain. And this whole time that I've been denied an injection, whilst being told that I should have been put on injections straight away, this whole time it could have been, you know, reversed with just one injection that cost the NHS pence. You know, I was given antidepressants, I was given sertraline, and I didn't take it because I just thought, I don't need it. I know when I'm anxious, and these are not anxious symptoms. I know my anxiety in and out. I know that like it's my best friend, and the symptoms that I were having were not it. And I even said, you know, to my doctors, my appetite, for an example, is controlled by anxiety. Things like sweating in the palms of my hand, I know that's anxiety, and I can take those symptoms and put them here, and the other symptoms and put them here. The ones that are here are the ones that I do not know why they're being caused. Now, it's safe for me to assume that because I've had this injection and I feel better, perhaps I needed that boost that was fully absorbed, and perhaps my B12 was, you know, yes, I had a great reading with it being 600, but maybe that was a mask, that actually all of that was. Also, I supplemented on the day of being tested again for B12. I took maybe even 2,000, you know, micrograms of that spray, and for my blood test to only be 600 rather than up in the thousands was, you know, even more of a cause for concern, really. So I feel like I've babbled way too much, but sometimes when you're so curious and you're desperate for answers, sometimes you just need to sit down and listen to somebody talk about their experience. And my next advice to you guys would be to join Facebook groups. There's a lot of advice of what to do. Do not take your blood test results as gospel, okay, unless you have your initial blood test. That is the most important test that you can have, because that sets the scene for everything. Avoid getting retested. Have an active B12 test. I went with a company called Forth with Life, There's other companies that do private blood tests. You do have to pay for them, but they're sent in a kit through to you in the post. They're very quick, really quick turnaround. Be tested for intrinsic factor, for MMA, for you know, all these other different things, because you need to know whether or not you absorb it. And I can promise you that this, once you know your B12 starts to dwindle, you start to feel it very, very quickly, and you do not want it to get to a point where it gets to irreversible you know, neurological damage, to the point where some people have not got the feeling back in their hands or their legs, or they can't see in their eyes properly, or something is going on and you cannot get it back, because you know, significant B12 deficiencies can lead to real terrible chronic health problems that could have been reversed. Do not leave this. Please go and get tested if you feel even significantly or slightly tired, okay? And you've been feeling this for a long time and it's not normal. This is the thing that I need to stress to you guys. If it's not normal, if it's not what you do on a usual basis, you need to go to the doctor, especially if it's affecting your life. And get a B12 reading, get an active B12 reading, get yourself tested for intrinsic factor and whether you can absorb it. And you don't want it to get to the stage where it's almost like too late and you're suffering damage from it. But right, I've been talking for a lot of time and I feel like I've been babbling, and I'm like, did I mention this or that? If you have any questions, please do leave comments down below for me, or you know, come follow me on Instagram, and I will get back to you straight away. This is something that I'm really passionate about, and you know, has really improved my quality of life and has educated me. If you do want me to do a video on health anxiety and that sort of thing, it was severe, Jesus wept. My health anxiety got out of hand, and it's therapeutic to talk about it. So if you'd like to know those stories and maybe, you know, got any feedback for how you want to do them, do you like it like this, or would you prefer me to do a bit of a makeup, get ready with me sort of thing, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for listening. Please go and get your B12 tested, either privately or with the NHS or wherever you are in the world. Please do it, because I promise you it is one of those hidden vitamins that the minute you are deficient is the minute that you will start to see a lot of health consequences. So yes, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in my next video. Bye!